What's up, guys? Sorry, I didn't realize the stream key had some things wrong. But anyways, um, so I'm gonna go over. I already went through in that list I did put out, but I'm gonna go through. What made these stand out, as well as some price targets over the levels. So in terms of flow, the first one that really stuck out to me was VIAC. Um, VIAC, the market is pulling things back, but there's some heavy call volume. Especially this 128.40 call really sticks out to me. And I think the reason being is there's this anticipation for possible buyout news or some sort of news from VIAC. So that's something I'm really intrigued with. But we also have downside potential, with 218 puts. But mainly calls are flowing in, which is very intriguing to see given the conditions of the market being pretty weak. So VIAC is definitely one that sticks out. The five tickers that I have on my watch list I'm going to talk about are NEO, Twitter, PINS, PINS, CCL, and of course VIAC. Let's go to NEO. Maybe if it'll load. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I didn't even realize that. But we're back. We're good. All right. So what sticks out on NEO? These up here are all, besides this 218, are all expired already. But this 128.30 call really sticks out considering we finished at 27.35, so that's $2.65 move up to 30, which is nice to see. We also have these 27 puts getting hit, but these 31 calls are also getting hit, which is nice to see as well. So I really like that. Really like that in terms of NEO. NEO's also at a pretty crucial spot once we get over and talk about those levels a little bit. So that's something I like with NEO a lot. Twitter. This one, Twitter's not normally on the top 50 hot chains and tickers, but this for today on Friday, it was, I believe, in that 30 to 40 range, so that really stuck out right off the get-go. But there's also a notification from Unusual Whales intraday that people were hammering this 218.38 call. So that was something that really sparked my interest as well. But when looking at this flow, it's pretty bullish, but it's more, those 218 calls that they're targeting. But this 128.37 and 128.36 call really stand out in terms of a possible bounce. Besides these three 121 puts, the rest of the flow is all bullish. So this is something I really like to see here. When we mix with levels, that's something that really stood out to me. This one, PINS was like 53rd or 54th on the list, but its flow really intrigues me. And the reason being, really bad day on PINS. But the highest volume chain is that 128.35 call. And then secondly, I know this is, 2 years out, but it's an 80 call. That's almost triple. That's over tripling the price of PINS right now in 2 years, which is pretty impressive. Something doesn't always happen, but that's something I really like. And it also has downside. We'll talk about it more with levels, but there's a gap below on PINS of about $3-ish. So that's something that I'm really targeting there in terms of PINS as well. CCL is another one that there's an Unusual Whales alert intraday that people were smacking that 128.21 call, which is very high up here. So that's something that really sparked my attention. And then when we look, even just using this little chart here, it's at a very crucial spot. So we can get a big move either way. And I really like that a lot in terms of being able to play both sides. Don't really know what the market's going to have. So that's something really stands out to me. But these 23 calls are getting hit, 21 calls, 20 put, which is already in the money. I mean, by a cent, but whatever. So this gives us the ability to play both sides, and that really stands out as well. Now when it comes to levels. So first one, I'll go over PINS first. So this is the daily of PINS, and I'm going to use that 29 psych level as the put trigger, simply because, we need to give this a little bit of room before it really identifies that it wants to fill this gap. But underneath that, there is absolutely no volume on this VPA over here until we reach about 26.15. But I'm going to watch that 26.5 level as a potential target, and then the gap fill actually is down here at 25.25. But when it comes to entering this, I'm going to use the psych levels of 0.25s, 0.5s, and ones or whole numbers, 28, 27, for real price targets when it comes to pins. If we have a pretty weak market tomorrow, I would expect pins to start to try and fill this gap pretty hard. So that's something I really like on the downside there with pins. On the upside, I have my call trigger here at 29.9, and that comes from this here. There's double tops here, test it ultimately before falling, which is really nice to see. So over that level, I'm targeting 30.1, and then over 30.1, we have this little bit of volume here, but we could really push up to that 31.4 and 31.6 level. So that gives us a nice range on both sides with the gap filled down on the daily, and then on the upside, very little volume, and there was some consolidation. Buyers were stepping in throughout the day after we had a very sharp knife off open. So I like that a lot for pins. NEO. For NEO, my call trigger is going to be 27.70, and that comes from the bottom of this zone here, tests it, and then falls off, ultimately knifing. And then 26.95 is my put trigger, and that comes from this daily chart. This big candle here, the high was 26.96, so this is a very big level. Previous breakout, it flags and breaks back up. But if we can see here, there's a bunch of room down to about 22-ish, and there's a gap below on NEO, so I like that downside as well. Very crucial spot to hold, but my first price target is going to be 26, under that 26.95 level. NEO is one that can move fast, and when it gets momentum, it's going to go fast in whatever direction. If it's a seller, I expect this to test 26 tomorrow, if not lower. If it's a bounce, it's going to be a little bit harder, as I do think market conditions are going to be, they're pretty bearish right now. So I'm going to wait, the first 15 minutes, really see how the market is handling. But on the upside, we also have pretty nice zones that we can play. My first target being 28.05, then 28.30, 28.52, and then 28.82. And those are just from zones over here. The VPA on the upside's pretty stacked, which kind of sucks. But the downside of this is very, very big, and there's hardly any VPA. So we could get a pretty decent move each side. The flow indicating, possible time for a bounce here in NEO. But as always, going to play price action. Next is Twitter. So on Twitter, I have my call trigger set here at 35.25, and that comes from, it's a big resistance, as we can see here on the 15, was a previous support. So that's a very big level. Over 35.25, we do have this little VPA here at about 35.31 to about 35.5. So I'm going to watch those levels a little bit, but my first target is going to be 35.60, especially with a pretty strong market. Over that, I like 35.95, 36.14, and 36.40. If we can get over 36.40, this could see a decent bounce to 37.20. I don't expect that in one day, especially with the weak market as we talked about. But the downside of Twitter is one that really, really excites me as well. And this level here, 35.45, is my put trigger. It comes from in here. I'm not going to zoom in too much because this thing's lagging a little bit, but that was a very big support and resistance level in there. And then underneath that, I like 34.20 is my first target. And then underneath 34.20, we really don't have too much until 33.45, which, that's a dollar move. This can pay pretty well on that downside. Those are the two levels I'm really, really looking at on Twitter. But the flow is indicating, some people are starting to take a longer stance. And on the upside, it looks like the biggest region of VPA is about 42.20. So this thing could move decently okay to the upside, but definitely favoring the downside, as I am with most of these tickers in this case. VIAC. So I never knew VIAC was valued this much and then dropped off so hard. But when it comes to call and put triggers, my original put trigger is right here at 30.85, and that comes from this zone right here. It's the bottom of this zone here. It's a support again here, and then ultimately before it knifes, it's a resistance zone. So I like that. My first target being 30.66, very big resistance zone here and here. So that's a big level to watch. And then under that, 30.43 and 30.20. And one thing with VIAC is it moves a little bit slower, but premiums are pretty cheap. So this is something we can play pretty well. Might not be the fastest mover, but we can get more options, more cons, and we can really practice some things. Nice little ND notification there. And then in terms of my call trigger, I'm going to use this 3175. It was the high here, low here. Looks a little bit better on the 15, but that's going to be my call trigger. First target up here near 32, 32.15, and then ultimately 32.50. If we get buyout news and this, it gaps up pretty decently, I would expect it to definitely retest at 31.75, and I'm certainly not going to be afraid to play puts on a failed retest of that call trigger there, because I'm expecting a pretty volatile, somewhat weak market. So if this market's weak, we still have news. This ticker could fade throughout the day, and I'm going to wait on that retest of 31.75 before really playing VIAC. CCL. CCL, as we talked about, has some pretty nice range on both the up and down. It's another slower moving ticker, but as we can see, there's a very big VPA here at 1995 to about 20.05. So this is something I really like to see, as under that there could be a nice move, as well as over that this can move pretty fast. On the upside, I'm going to have my call trigger at 20.25 and my put trigger at 1978. And that comes from the bottom here. But if I can scroll out and this doesn't lag too bad, that 1978 level was big. It was a prior breakout and then go. So I like that level a lot. Under that, I'm targeting 1965, and then if it'll let me scroll out, and then 1935 and 1918. Underneath that level, there's a nice gap on this 15-minute VPA, so this can move pretty fast, especially with those cheap premiums, people trying to get in. So that's one I'm definitely looking on the downside, as well as the upside. I like 20.25 call trigger, and then over that I'm looking at 20.38, 20.47, and then ultimately 20.65. If we can get over that, we can move pretty fast, but I'm not expecting, especially a ticker like CCL that doesn't move more than usually $1, $1.50 through the entire daily range. I don't expect a crazy move out of it, but it does have very nice up and downside, so I like CCL a lot.